Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel Bilingual Mingle. My name is Tanya, and in today's video I would like to share with you my observations regarding the best approach to raise a bilingual child based on the experience of our family and the language progress that my 20-month-old son Leon has so far been doing with both languages, Russian and English. If you haven't done it yet, please make sure to subscribe to my channel down below so you don't miss the next video. Hit the like button if you like this video, and let's start! There are so many ways to raise a bilingual child, and each family chooses the way that fits their family dynamic. The most popular approach to raise a bilingual child currently in the world is called OPOL. OPOL stands for one person, one language, and the approach that families take if they decide to follow this very structured, and I can even call it academic approach, is when one person or one parent who speaks one language only uses this language during their communication with a child, and another person is doing the same thing but with a second language. The approach OPOL does not necessarily work only for birth parents. For instance, if a household consists of parents who speak one language and grandparents who speak another language, this technically can also fall into the under the type of OPOL if both of the languages are taught to a child. The second most common approach to raise a bilingual child is called MLH. MLH stands for minority language at home, and this approach usually fits best to the immigrant families who decide to use the language of minority in order to communicate with their child at home, and then their child starts using the language of majority once he or she starts attending preschool, kindergarten, school, starts integrating into the community he or she lives in. Obviously, both of those approaches, despite the fact that they're still the most popular ones in the world, despite this fact, both of those approaches definitely have some disadvantages. For instance, OPOL, as I mentioned earlier, is a very academic and very structured approach, and the key feature of this approach is really to for it to be structured, which means that you don't really have a lot of space, a lot of wiggle room, right? In order to be able to sometimes maybe deviate from this approach, you have to be very strict with your child in terms of the language that you are using during their communication with him or her, and therefore if one of the parents is bilingual and does not have any difficulties communicating in both languages with a child, sometimes when it might be necessary, this approach would tell us that we can't really do this and we have to always stick to only one language, which is a primary language of our communication with a child. The disadvantage of MLH approach is that obviously once a child starts integrating more and more into the community they are part of, they start using their language of majority just because they start spending more time with their friends, so with their schoolmates, classmates, and therefore they obviously gonna start prioritizing one language, the language of majority, of the language of minority. Of course, there are ways to go around and kind of correct the approach as you continue teaching language to your child, but I just wanted to mention some of the biggest disadvantages of both of those approaches, because they actually were the reason why I decided to record this video, to show that there are other options outside those most traditional ones, OPOL and MLH, and also to show why we as a bilingual family decided not to follow neither of those approaches and actually choose another one. So since I speak Russian and my husband speaks English, we originally went with OPOL approach. Since, as I mentioned earlier, it was the most popular one, it seemed to be the most logical one to follow to our family. However, very soon, I would say after 5 to 6 months of Leon's life, we understood that this approach, especially for me, was quite stressful, because I, by being a bilingual person, constantly had to kind of make a mental note that I can't switch between languages, even when my husband was also present in the room together with Leon, and I had to stick to Russian when I was talking with Leon. So it was quite stressful, especially I'm a first-time mom, and there were other things that I had to figure out and organize and decide on. And just because of all these things combined together, I also had a full-time job and a part-time job as a teacher. All these things together, I just seemed like it's too much stress for me, and having a child was, actually being able to spend some time with a child was just part of my life that I actually wanted to have more control over and wanted to take more pleasure from, and therefore out of necessity, I would say originally, I decided to move away from a OPOL approach and started doing my research regarding other approaches that might fit to our family dynamic. As I started doing my research, one of the approaches that I came across is called mixed system. Mixed system number 1 and mixed system number 2. There are two approaches, and the main difference between them is really what is considered to be the language of majority and the language of minority of the community that your family is part of. The main approach consists of just one of the parents. If one of the parents is able to speak both languages, then this person is totally fine, is totally free to speak and to use both of the languages with a child. Depending on the situation, depending on whether they're interacting with another parent who is monolingual, or depending on the situation that a conversation is taking place in. So this approach, as you can see, is less strict, but as I observed it based on the family dynamic of our family, it requires more control from parents' side because the balance between languages still needs to be observed. So in my opinion, this approach, and so far we've been using it for I would say over 9 months. This approach definitely works for us better. It's less stressful. It also requires us less time to communicate things to each other, and definitely none of us is left behind during the communication. As I mentioned earlier, the decision to raise your child according to one of the approaches is going to really be based on a lot of factors. And when we decided to switch between a OPOL to mixed systems approach, we based our decision on the 3 main factors. The first one is our family's language pattern. We speak English in our household, and since my early adulthood years, I've lived in the United States since I was 18, and the majority of my adulthood years I've already spent in the United States. So for me, it's easier to really express my thoughts in English, and I sometimes even struggle to do the same in Russian. So English is definitely I don't want to say that it's prioritized, but there's more time when we use English in our household, and that was one of the most decisive factors. The second factor is our goal towards Leon's bilingualism, and I think this is one of the points actually a lot of families don't define for themselves before they start raising their child, and it's okay to decide on it kind of later on down the road once your child is born, but it's very important to at least think about this. So the goal towards your child's bilingualism is not going to be always the same to each family. Some families are planning for their child to later study abroad. Some families are planning to maybe even move later to their native country of one of their parents. Some families want their child to be bilingual as soon as possible, right? So there are different really goals that we can take towards or we can have for our child's bilingualism, and obviously later later on our child is going to start having his or her own goals and intentions of using both languages. So that's also very important to consider later down the road. So our main goal, at least now towards Leon's bilingualism, is for him to be able to use two languages during their communication, right? So that he could communicate, especially with our family members, with my part of the family who is from Russia, freely and without any efforts in Russian. So that's our main goal. We're not planning to send Leon to Russian school or Russian university. I think that's not going to be necessary, and we're not also planning to, at least for now, we're not planning to move back to Russia or Russian-speaking country so that he can receive education or we can continue our careers there. So therefore, as you can see, that our goal is for Leon to be able to use language as a function, is a communicative function, in order to communicate with others. And therefore, we are not really going to be very strict regarding his grammar skills, regarding his ability to understand where to put the correct punctuation or what kind of style of language to use. It's really communicative goal that we are pursuing right now, and therefore it's okay for us, or we consider it to be okay, to show him that it's okay to switch between languages. But when you know that the person you're speaking to is monolingual, you need to be able to use the language that this person shares with you. And the third factor that we considered is linguistic ability of our household. Since I speak both languages, English and Russian, and I'm bilingual myself, I don't mind communicating with Leon sometimes in English if that's what our circumstances require us to do, or if that's what he decides to do, just because I'm sure that by living in the United States it's going to be easier for him to use English over Russian. So I also think that it's great for a bilingual person who is only starts acquiring his bilingual skills and bilingual vision of real communication and language systems, to see the example of another bilingual person, which is me, in front of him. I think that bilingual people, as I mentioned in my previous videos, they very soon start seeing the differences between them and monolingual people in their community, and it's very important for them to not just understand how they can switch between languages, but also what kind of place they can find in the community they live in, and that can be only shown by the example of another person with whom you spend the majority of time together. So those were our three main factors that made really this choice to switch to make systems approach quite easy for us. So as I mentioned earlier, such approach, mixed system approach, requires more checks from both partners in order to make sure that balance is observed in both languages. However, some families mistakenly think that as long as a child is using both languages kind of equal amount of time, this balance is observed. This is really not necessarily true, and really depends on two major factors and how this language should be observed. The first factor is that we need to take into consideration whether the language the child is learning is a language of minority or majority. For different type of language, it's going to be a different type of balance that needs to be observed. And another factor is that what kind of exposure does the child get in this particular language. In this system, it's not really enough to just make sure that child communicates in each language equally, but it's really important the amount and types really of language skills that we expose and teach our child to. So let's imagine scales that are going to represent this balance that we're trying to keep it between two languages. And I'm going to just provide you examples based on how our day is structured and what type of activities we usually engage Leon in. So let's say in the first part of the day, I spend the majority of time with Leon and we are practicing Russian. And one of the days I decide to just, expose him to new vocabulary and learn new vocabulary with him, new Russian words. And this is going to be one of the activities, kind of cultural contextualization, making sure he understands what those words mean, making sure he understands also what they mean in the context of, conversation in Russian, and we're going to do it through reading. So we're going to read a book where some new vocabulary is used. And then we would like to also make sure that we start understanding how this vocabulary can be used by us, by child, right? And we're gonna do it through creating really space for communication. We can do it via pretend play. So that's gonna be in one part of the scale. Another part of the scale, once my husband is done with work and he starts having some time to spend with Leon, he's definitely going to have to practice some skills in English language. But those skills are not necessarily going to be the same ones. So if we learn vocabulary in Russian during one of the days, it's better to do something else also in English, just so not just one particular skill is practiced in both languages. One of the really important things to practice with a bilingual child is creativity. Creativity helps bilingual children to also do not be afraid to communicate in different languages and to even mix languages up if they need to. And creativity can be obviously developed by drawing or naming, while drawing, naming shapes and colors. Obviously, my husband would do it in English language, so to practice Leon's language skills. And another skill that we can practice, which is also crucial for bilinguals, is memory, right? Memory should be practiced, obviously, in order for a child to learn both language systems, actually also vocabularies, right? Vocabulary in both languages, really important to practice memory for bilinguals and monolinguals. And we can practice memory through match game, right? So matching game to match cards, maybe even discuss what you see in the cards, but this is going to be another skills that they are practicing in English. So that's what I mean by scale. And obviously, next day you can switch tasks and practice creativity and memory in Russian, and also practice or learn new vocabulary in English. As you can see, balance in this system primarily should be not between the amount of time child is exposed to each of the language, but between the amount of skills that are taught to our child in each language. And that's why it's really important to make decision regarding the system that you're going to use while teaching both languages to a child, based on family dynamics, because each family is different, and based on whether both partners work, whether one of partners stays at home, whether child goes to childcare, daycare. Those all factors are going to definitely influence, and also the goal of bilingualism that you are trying to pursue with your child. Those are going to be really important factors to consider while you're making this decision. It's also important to keep in mind that if you enable such language learning system, mixed system, in your household, the variety of activities that you expose and teach your child to should be quite wide, because as I mentioned earlier, you can't just read one book in Russian, for instance, and another book in English, right? So the variety of activities should be very wide, and they have to be constantly switched just so you practice enough skills in both languages. So as a result, the first thing that is definitely worth mentioning is that Leon sees all languages that he is taught and he speaks as primarily functional tools in order to that he's using to get things done, right, or to communicate stuff to his parents, friends, and family members. He knows many words in both languages, and depending on which parent he is talking to, or if it's not us, maybe there are some family members, my parents, he is using the words in the language that is a primary language of communication of the person he is talking to, and he sometimes mixes things up. Sometimes some words he only knows in one language and not another. So this stuff still happens. I'm sure it's going to happen until he's like 5 or 6, but he definitely knows that he needs to use language to get what he wants, right? So another result of this mixed system approach is that our one-on-one time with him is really much longer, especially when it comes to my husband, because I currently don't have a full-time job. I only teach part-time, and therefore I obviously spend more time with him, and I obviously have more time in my hands to practice all the different kinds of activities. But when it comes to my husband, I think if we followed a OPOL approach, he would just kind of spend time with him and kind of just to try to occupy Leon during the time when he's with him in the evening, rather than kind of what he's doing actually now is trying to be creative with activities he's introducing to Leon. And definitely I think the time that he spends with him and while he's engaged in those activities is has more quality in it, and it's kind of more quality time, I think. And also, since they are occupied in some activities and have to practice certain activities per day, it takes some time, and it's not really I would say like they spend a lot of time together, and I think that also allows them to even bond during those activities, and really stay close. And the third result is that Leon observes all the advantages and difficulties of being bilingual. Like I said, I think it's a really good example that he can see bilingual, another bilingual in front of him, and see that how I can switch between languages, and when I switch between languages, when it's necessary for me to do it, to be able to switch between two language systems and know how to adapt to language conditions of the circle of people that he is in is a very important skill, and definitely he can learn it much later if we follow the OPOL approach. But since we follow a mixed system approach, I think he is going to do it much earlier. So I think this is actually even probably one of my favorite results and outcomes of the approach that we chose. So due to the changes in families' lifestyles during the past 15-20 years, mixed system is actually becoming more and more popular, and even beats MLH approach in some of the countries like Spain. In the study that I came across that was done by De Hoover in 2007, mixed system follows MLH approach really closely. The differences in between like 3%, close to 3%. I'm actually going to pull up the results of the report right here on the slide. And so mixed system 1, where two parents speak minority language, but also one of the parents knows majority language and mixes those two languages with the child, that follows MLH very closely. Mixed system 2 approach, this is actually the one that we're using in our family when one parent knows a language of minority and majority, and another parent only the language of majority. This is still on the last place in this research. But still, the success rate is close to 36%, 35.70. So success rate of kids who follow this approach is quite high, and I think that the number might be even higher if people would be more confident in their abilities to teach bilingualism, not through necessarily a very standard academic approach like OPOL that so many people already got used to, but kind of if they were more creative with it and not so afraid to mess something up. So what is more, while raising a bilingual child, the parenting system can change based on the family dynamics. Parents should be able to adjust based on their child's needs, and the most important to do it really stress-free for both parties. In this case, a family moving from OPOL to mixed system, it's important to keep in mind that this parental kind of emotional bond that was formed by the language that one of the parents was sharing with the child could break, and it could be a little bit stressful for the child. Also, if you move into the opposite direction and switch in from mixed system to OPOL, that very often happens when child starts attending preschool, kindergarten, school, really any organization that is going to prevent him from keeping this balance between languages that he was able to maintain in the household, because he's not going to see one of his parents or her parents as much as he or she did it in the past. In this case, this also parental bond that was formed between child and actually one of the parents who was mixing languages based on the situation, that can also kind of start being at risk. And it's very important to have a conversation with the child and explain that from now on, because there are some changes that's happening in your life, because of this, we're gonna have to start only communicating in one of the languages, but it's, you know, for your own benefit, and later on we're gonna again return back to you know, to talking in both languages with you. So this is important to keep in mind. It's important to have this conversation with the child, but also the skill to switch between languages based on the situation, based on circumstances, in my opinion, is the best and the most important skill that you can teach a bilingual child. And I think that should be taught from the very young age. And obviously here, that's where mixed system becomes so handy and so such a useful approach. And finally, parents who choose to use mixed language system should not really be afraid that in the end their child is going to start using only one language, prefer speaking one language and not another. Or, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's a language of majority, language of minority. Children are going to do it anyway, so I hope that that makes some of you feel better about this approach if you decide to follow our experience. Child, really any child, is really practical in his or her abilities and in his or her desire to use a language. They're really using it to get stuff done and to get what they want, and they're gonna decide really on their own when, with whom, and what language they're going to use. So don't be afraid that mixed language system is going to might be misleading, or is going to kind of get you a different outcome than what you expect from your child's bilingualism. Just make sure that you're doing everything stress-free. Make sure that you closely observe your family dynamics and choose the approach that fits best to your needs and to your preferences, and just have fun with your child and make it fun for them. So that was it. I hope you found this video helpful and useful. If you have some questions or comments, or you'd like to share your story of raising your child as a bilingual child, please make sure to leave your comment down below. I'm always happy to read your comments and answer questions. I also appreciate each of you, so thank you so much for those who already subscribed to my channel, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!